I am the eldest daughter of a wealthy family. After my beloved father passed away, my fiancé Julian immediately proposed to me. The arrogant crown prince of the A-list circle knelt on one knee, his posture extremely humble. Serena, marry me. I've also found your long-lost sister. Today, we will officially welcome her into the family and add her to the Sue family lineage. You won't be alone anymore. I lightly brushed my fingers over his gold-threaded sandalwood nameplate and chuckled. Julian, my parents loved each other deeply their entire lives. How could there possibly be a long-lost illegitimate sister? The color drained from Julian's face in an instant. His Adam's apple bobbed as he suppressed the hoarseness in his voice. Serena, don't be difficult. I shook my wrist, the diamond bracelet scattering tiny sparkles under the crystal chandelier. So beautiful, just how I like it. I'm not making a fuss. I tilted my head to look at him, a smile creeping into the corners of my eyes. Didn't you say the family's prosperity is the most important thing? The Gu family thrives when its branches flourish. Having more siblings to support you is always better than fighting alone. His knees trembled slightly, as though maintaining the kneeling posture had suddenly become strenuous. That's different, his voice tensed up, your sister is. She's part of this family, so she must return to her roots, right? I cut him off, that makes sense. But I believe in fairness. Since we're looking for relatives, we should treat everyone equally. As I spoke, I pulled out my phone, tapped on the private investigator's number in my contacts, and hovered my finger over the call button with a deliberate pause. I heard your grandfather spent 3 years in Europe back in the day? And your father in his youth. Our big family thrives when it's populous. I agree with your idea. Enough. Julian abruptly stood up. Serena, must you do this? I slipped my phone back into my pocket and leisurely smoothed out the wrinkles on my skirt. What's wrong with me? I looked up at him, my tone soft. Wasn't it you who brought up the prosperity of the family first? Or does Julian's idea of family prosperity only count when it includes members of the Sue family? His chest heaved violently. The attendant standing nearby had long since tactfully retreated to the end of the hallway, leaving only the sound of his ragged breathing echoing through the vast living room. I just thought, he finally found his voice after a long pause, though much of the conviction had drained from it, it wouldn't hurt to have an extra person. Really? I stood up, half a head shorter than him, yet the force of my presence alone made him take half a step back. Then I'm really looking forward to seeing whether you'll still be smiling and saying that more people are always a good thing when Julian's siblings start crawling out from every corner of the world. I turned and walked toward the staircase. By the way, I paused at the landing and glanced back at him, curling my lips into a mocking smile. I'll put the detective's fees on your tab. After all, it's for the prosperity of the Gu family. You should go tell your mother to prepare all the rooms. Who knows how many we'll have to bring back? He froze in place. If he wants to set his sights on the Sue family, he'd better consider whether he has the capital for it. I keep my word. If I say I'll help others and assist the Gu family in finding their child, I'll truly do it. The private detective's efficiency was astonishingly high. In just over half a month, 2 thick case files were placed in the most prominent spot on my desk. One contained the details of Julian's half-brother and Haiching, who was raising a child. In the photo, they both smiled with genuine simplicity. The other file documented the illegitimate child left behind by his father in Paris, whose features bore a striking resemblance to Julian's. I specifically asked the butler to send the files to Julian by courier, with a note attached, written in fountain pen, "May the Gu family flourish." I thought it would take him at least a month to deal with the mess, but to my surprise, he showed up at my doorstep again after just 3 weeks. What surprised me even more was that there was a girl standing behind him. Dressed in a cotton dress, she stood beside him, timidly glancing around at everything before her, her fingers nervously twisting the straps of her canvas bag. Her features did bear some resemblance to mine, especially those eyes, though they lacked my boldness and carried instead a gentle timidity. Serena. Julian stood at the entrance, his suit impeccably pressed, though the dark circles under his eyes betrayed sleepless nights. I brought her. Her? I cut him off, my gaze shifting past him to settle on the girl, my tone flat. And who is this? The girl shrank under my stare, edging closer to Julian as if seeking refuge. Julian smoothly draped an arm around her shoulders, his gesture intimate. This is Serena, your sister. Sister? I scoffed. Julian's memory is impressive. I thought you'd be busy dividing the family fortune among your newly recognized brothers. I didn't expect you'd still have time to meddle in my family affairs. Julian's expression froze. He let go of Serena and took half a step forward as if to speak, but a single glare from me rooted him to the spot. I know you're upset, he softened his tone, just like when he used to shield me from drinking at gatherings, but blood ties can't be erased, after all, she is. Blood ties? I walked up to him. Julian, have you considered her age? His Adam's apple bobbed, but he remained silent. She's only 1 year younger than me. I emphasized the words 1 year. This means that for over 2 decades, from my birth until my father's death, he had ample time to father children with other women. Selena's face paled instantly, tears welling up in her eyes as she choked out, "Sis, I didn't mean to. I never said you did." I didn't even glance at her, my gaze fixed on Julian. I'm simply stating facts. It's you. I tilted my head to look at him, bringing her here, what are you trying to do? Julian avoided my gaze, I just don't want you to have regrets. Blood ties. Regrets? I scoffed. So, what then? Did you bring her here to claim her lineage or to demand I split the family shares with her? Serena finally broke into tears, sniffling as she said, I don't want the shares. I just wanted to see where Dad lived. Dad? Who are you calling Dad? Julian's face darkened completely. Serena, do you have to be so aggressive? Aggressive? Who was the one bringing irrelevant people before me? If you ask me, instead of letting her cry here nonstop, why don't you do her a favor? Julian frowned. What do you mean? My family happens to need a maid. I raised my eyes and looked at Serena. She would be responsible for cleaning the 2nd floor, with a monthly salary of $8,000, including room and board. If she's willing, the butler can help her with the onboarding process tomorrow. Selena's crying stopped abruptly as she stared at me in disbelief. Julian's face turned pale, then flushed with anger, clenching his fists and growling, Serena, you've gone too far. Too much? I turned and walked towards the 2nd floor. Compared to the two of you joining forces to expose my father's scandal, how is this even considered excessive? I paused at the stairwell corner, glanced back at the two frozen in place, and said coldly, Butler, see them out. And tell Julian, if he dares to bring irrelevant people here again, don't blame me for having security throw him out. Julian watched my figure disappear at the top of the stairs, his chest heaving violently, yet he ultimately didn't dare to follow. Standing on the 2nd floor balcony, I looked down to see Serena still sobbing quietly while Julian wrapped an arm around her shoulder to comfort her. The butler handed me the tablet just as the press conference on the screen reached its climax. Serena, dressed in a brand new white dress, sat beside Julian, weeping delicately for the cameras while clutching a yellowed photograph, supposedly of her mother with my father in years past. I never meant to take anything from my sister, she sobbed, her shoulders trembling slightly. I just wanted to call him Dad properly, even though he's already gone. Camera flashes burst around her, perfectly capturing that image of vulnerability and helplessness. Julian sat nearby, handing over a tissue at just the right moment, his eyes brimming with pity. Speaking into the microphone, he said solemnly, Serena has had a very tough life these years, working odd jobs to get through college. Her mother's greatest wish before passing away was for her to be recognized by her family. And as Serena's fiancé, I can't bear to see her miss out on family ties because of a moment of irrationality. My gaze rested on Selena's face, red from crying. For some reason, another face suddenly flashed through my mind. More than 20 years ago, there was a face just as tearful, kneeling outside the carved doors of our old family home, holding a little girl in her arms, begging my mother to give them away to survive. I was only 5 years old at the time, leaning on the windowsill on the second floor, watching that woman in her faded blouse, her forehead pressed against the bluestone, the girl in her arms wailing desperately. Mother stood inside the door, silent from start to finish, just watching quietly. Later, I learned that the woman was Selena's mother, and the girl in her arms was Serena. That night, Father knelt outside Mother's room, hoarsely explaining that it had just been a moment of foolishness. Through the door, Mother asked him, "What do you plan to do?" Father said, "I'll cut all ties with them and never let them set foot in the Sioux family again." Mother let out a light laugh, a laughter filled with unspeakable weariness. "An affair is never just one person's fault, but I can't tolerate betrayal. From today onward, you'll sleep in the study." After that, my parents' bedroom was indeed separated. Mother still managed everything in the Sioux family, treating Father with polite courtesy. Father indeed kept his promise. For more than 20 years after that, Serena and her mother never appeared before us, and I had nearly forgotten there was such a person. Turns out, they didn't forget, they were waiting. Waiting for my father to take his last breath, waiting for the helm of the Sioux family to pass to me, and only then did they step forward, treading over my father's bones. On the tablet, Serena was still crying, saying her mother had urged her on her deathbed never to cause trouble for the Sioux family. Staring into those eyes, so identical to that woman's in my memory, I suddenly laughed soundlessly. Like mother, like daughter. Back then, her mother knelt outside the door, pleading just for a bite to eat. Now, she sits at the press conference, tearfully claiming she only wants to acknowledge her roots. Too bad, they've miscalculated. My mother had the backbone to make my father sleep in the study for over 20 years. As for me, Serena, I'm no pushover either. I won't let outsiders take even a fraction of what's rightfully mine. Julian is really warm-hearted. I tossed the tablet to the butler and walked to the floor-to-ceiling window, gazing at the newly bloomed white camellias in the garden below. He's even meddling in my family affairs. Anyone would think he's our live-in son-in-law. The butler lowered his eyes submissively and said, "The reporters outside have already started writing nonsense, saying you can't tolerate your own sister, and that the master wronged her mother back in the day. Let them write whatever they want. We'll hold a press conference tomorrow too." At 10 o'clock the next morning, the Sioux family's press conference began on schedule. I was dressed in a plain black pantsuit, my face devoid of any makeup, only my eyes were alarmingly red, as if I hadn't slept all night. As I stepped onto the speaker's platform, a flood of camera flashes surged instantly from below, almost blinding me. I wasn't in a hurry to speak but stood there quietly, my gaze slowly sweeping over the sea of reporters below. Their voice recorders and cameras were all aimed at me, their eyes filled with curiosity and anticipation, clearly waiting to witness the next act of the Sioux family's farce. For a full half-minute, I hesitated before picking up the microphone, my voice deliberately restrained but still quivering. "Thank you all for coming today." As soon as the words left my lips, tears streamed down my cheeks. I raised my hand to wipe them away haphazardly, struggling to maintain composure, but unable to steady my trembling voice. "I assume everyone has seen yesterday's news. Some claim my father has a daughter born out of wedlock." Taking a deep breath, my fingers turned white from gripping the microphone too tightly, "But I'm here to tell you, that is impossible. My father, Vincent, loved only my mother his entire life." I raised my voice, looking steadily at the camera. From as far back as I can remember, he would read poetry to my mother every night, and no matter how busy his business trips were, he never forgot to bring her gifts. He has said more than once in public that the luckiest thing in Vincent's life was marrying my mother, and the proudest thing was having me as his daughter. Whispers broke out in the audience as some began murmuring to each other. As if I hadn't heard, I continued, "My father just passed away. His ashes are still in the mourning hall at home, not yet laid to rest." At this point, I could no longer control myself. Covering my mouth, I broke into uncontrollable sobs. Her shoulders trembled violently, as if unable to bear the sudden slander. He was an upright man his entire life, renowned in the A circle for cherishing his wife and doting on his daughter. How could he possibly have an illegitimate child? And now, Before his body is even cold in the grave, someone comes forward with a dubious photograph claiming to be his daughter? This isn't about acknowledging ancestry, this is about splattering filth on my father's gravestone. I won't allow it. I suddenly lowered my hand, a flash of resolve passing through my bloodshot eyes. I, Serena, swear here that as long as I remain a member of the Sioux family, I will never let anyone slander my father's reputation like this. The flashlights below the stage became even more intense, as a reporter eagerly raised their hand. Serena, what's your take on the evidence provided by Julian and Miss Selena? I looked at the reporter, tears welling up in my eyes again. Evidence? What does an old photo prove? My father had so many social engagements during his lifetime, wasn't it common for him to take photos with anyone? As for Julian. I hesitated, lowering my head as if struggling to speak. I don't want to speak ill of others, but I truly don't understand why young Master Gu would interfere in our Sioux family's affairs and even help outsiders slander my father. As soon as these words were spoken, the room erupted in chaos. The journalists' murmurs grew louder, and suspicion flickered in many of their eyes. I knew this move was the right one. Julian wanted to use public opinion to force my hand, so I decided to let him taste the backlash of that very same tactic. Lastly, I picked up the microphone again, my voice still choked with emotion. I will pursue legal action against those involved to protect my father's reputation. I also urge everyone to stop spreading false information and let the deceased rest in peace. With that, I bowed deeply to the audience before turning and quickly walking off stage, avoiding any further interviews. As I stepped into the backstage lounge, the tear stains on my face hadn't dried yet, but the vulnerability in my eyes instantly faded, leaving only icy calmness. The butler handed me a glass of warm water. Miss, your performance was excellent. I took the glass of water, sipped it, and looked out the window at the still noisy reporters. A smirk curved at the corner of my lips. The real show is just beginning. Julian and Selena want to play the media game? Then I'll play right along with them, until the very end. The door to the lounge was flung open just as I finished cooling my eyes with cold water. Julian barged in with Selena, both of their faces still flushed with anger, followed by a few reporters carrying cameras. Clearly, he had intentionally led them here. Serena, what kind of nonsense were you spouting at the press conference? Julian stormed up to me, the veins in his eyes even redder than mine. How dare you call Selena an outsider? Who do you think you are to question my motives? Before I could say a word, Selena stepped forward half a step, her eyes red, clutching tightly to the silk handkerchief that supposedly contained my father's hair. Sister, I know this is hard for you to accept, but I really am Dad's daughter. When I was little, I saw you once at the department store. You were wearing a pink princess dress, held in Dad's arms. Mom and I hid behind a pillar and watched for the longest time. Her voice grew quieter, choked with tears. Why won't you acknowledge me? Can we do a paternity test? Just compare my DNA with Dad's, and it'll prove I'm telling the truth. A paternity test? I jolted back as if scalded by the words, tears welling up instantly. This time, I didn't have to force the tears, they came naturally, fueled by the anger boiling in my chest at their sheer audacity. Julian immediately seized the moment, raising his voice to the surrounding reporters. Serena, I know you're acting out of momentary confusion. Blood ties are the most precious, don't let stubbornness make you miss out on true family. A paternity test will make everything clear. It's for the best, for everyone. For everyone? I laughed, tears streaming down my chin and dripping onto my plain black suit dress, leaving tiny dark stains. Julian, tell me, what exactly is for the best? I pointed at the silk handkerchief in Selena's hand, my voice trembling with emotion. She's holding strands of hair from who knows where, insisting on running a paternity test with my father. If we agree today, will some Aunt Zhang or Grandma Li show up tomorrow with children, claiming a fleeting connection with my father? The day after, will Uncle Wang or Grandpa Zhao bring out old photos, saying my father resembles their long-lost son? What do you take my father for? My voice suddenly rose, tears blurring my vision. A stud horse? Some tool for strangers to exploit? He cared deeply about his reputation while alive. Now, even in death, can't he rest in peace? Must you drag him out to face paternity tests with random strangers? Serena shrank back at my words, her silk handkerchief falling to the ground, her face as pale as paper. Sister, that's not what I meant. I just wanted to prove my identity. Prove your identity? I stepped closer to her with every word, each step laced with tears. He's already gone, and yet you still want to force me to extract his very bones and blood just to serve as your evidence? By the time I reached the last few words, I was practically shouting, my chest heaving violently and my whole body trembling. Tears streaked my face, making me look utterly haggard and pitiful. Julian reached out to steady me, but I jerked away fiercely. Don't you dare touch me. Julian, didn't you want the reporters to witness this? Fine, I'll make it crystal clear today. I turned to the journalists holding their cameras, my vision blurred with tears but my voice crystal clear. My father Vincent's ashes will be laid to rest next week. Anyone who dares disturb even a single strand of his remains, I, Serena, will fight tooth and nail, even if it means dragging down the entire Sioux family, to make them pay with blood. As for the paternity test, I glared back at Serena, my gaze so fierce she instinctively recoiled. It will never happen. Serena's face turned deathly pale, her lips trembling without a sound. Julian's expression darkened as well. Housekeeper, escort these guests out. Starting today, no one, except my mother's memorial tablet, will lay a finger on my father's ashes. As night fell, raindrops pattered against the glass windows of the Sioux family's ancestral home. Just as the butler finished reporting on the situation with the reporters, the doorbell rang at the entrance. There was no need to ask, it was Julian. He stood under the porch, his black overcoat soaked halfway through by the rain, his damp hair clinging to his forehead. Gone was the confident vigor of daylight, replaced instead by a touch of disheveled exhaustion. Holding a thermal flask in his hand, he showed a hesitant expression when I opened the door. Serena, may I come in and talk for a moment? I stepped aside to let him in but left the door open. The cold wind, carrying raindrops, rushed into the living room, making the crystal chandelier sway gently. Say what you need to say here, I said. I'm tired and don't have the energy to play games with you. He placed the thermal flask on the entryway cabinet and paused while taking off his coat. I asked the housekeeper to prepare bird's nest soup. You cried so much at the press conference today, this will soothe your throat. No need. I cut him off, my gaze lingering on his soaked cuffs. Julian, you didn't rush here in the rain late at night just to deliver bird's nest soup, did you? He remained silent for a moment before walking to the center of the living room. The flickering firelight from the fireplace cast shifting shadows across his face. Serena, about what happened today. I was too hasty. But Serena is truly pitiful. She grew up in a rented apartment with her mother and never even had decent clothes to wear. Pitiful? I chuckled, settling onto the sofa and pressing my fingers against my throbbing temples. If she's pitiful, then what about me? My father just passed away, and someone shows up under the pretense of claiming family ties, forcing me to scream like a madwoman at the press conference. I think I'm quite pitiful too. That's not what I meant, he quickly explained, his tone softening. I just didn't want things to turn so ugly. After all, she also carries the blood of the Sioux family. The Sioux family's bloodline? I raised an eyebrow at him, fingertips lightly tapping on the armrest of the sofa. Julian, is it sympathy for her background, or are you just fixated on that so-called Sioux family blood in her veins? His expression stiffened as he averted his gaze. I just think there's no need for things to come to this among family. Family? You pity her for being homeless, for enduring so much suffering. But have you ever stopped to think about how she should be settled? Julian faltered. You could marry her instead. I suddenly laughed, my voice as light as a sigh. Julian is young and promising, and the Gu family is a prestigious name in the A-list circle. Marry her, make her your wife, and she'll still enjoy boundless glory. By then, not just acknowledging her lineage, even if you want her to step into the Sioux family, I might consider it. His eyes widened abruptly, as if scalded by my words. Serena. What nonsense are you saying? Nonsense? I tilted my head, watching him as the warmth in my gaze gradually chilled. Don't you think she's pitiful? Don't you want to protect her? Marrying her, giving her a name and someone to lean on, isn't that exactly what someone as warm-hearted as you should do? The one I love is you. He suddenly grabbed my wrist, his eyes churning with complex emotions, urgency, anger, and a trace of barely perceptible panic. From the moment I first saw you, you've been the only one I've ever loved. I watched him quietly, letting him grasp my wrist until his grip loosened slightly, then I spoke calmly, "Oh?" A log in the fireplace crackled, sparking a flash of flame. It ignited the silence. I withdrew my hand, my fingertips lightly rubbing the reddened spot where he had held me. Julian, you claim to like me, yet before my father's bones have even turned cold, you bring a woman who claims to be my sister to my doorstep, forcing me to acknowledge this disgraceful past. You claim to like me, yet you collude with outsiders to hold a press conference, making me the laughingstock of the entire city, accusing me of being unable to tolerate my own sister. You claim to like me, yet after I clearly refused the paternity test, you still speak up for her, calling her pitiful, saying I shouldn't have made such a scene. Julian, I looked up into his eyes and asked word by word, is this what you call liking someone? Steward, show the guest out. Julian gave me a deep look, then turned and walked into the vast, rainy night. The moment the door closed, I let go of all my strength. Liking someone? It's truly the cheapest two words in the world. The sky was heavily overcast on the day of my father's burial, and the wind carried a biting chill. Clad in a black dress, I knelt before the grave and scattered the final handful of earth onto the tombstone with my own hands. In the black and white photograph, my father smiled gently, as if still gazing at me the way he always had, his eyes brimming with affection. The elders from Circle A stood at a distance, murmuring words of consolation, while the butler directed the servants in cleaning up the offerings. Everything proceeded solemnly and in order. Until a piercing cry shattered the silence. Dad! Dad, wait for me! No one knew how Serena had slipped in, but there she was, wearing an ill-fitting white dress, darting past the security line like a ghost, straight toward her father's gravestone. Julian followed close behind, his face full of urgency as he tried to grab her arm, but she shook him off violently. Let me die. She collapsed in front of the tombstone, her nails digging desperately into the cold stone surface as she wailed in anguish. I'm so useless. I couldn't even fulfill my mother's last wish. What's the point of me living? The surrounding guests erupted in murmurs, all turning their heads in shock. I slowly rose from my seat, the shadow falling across my face, masking the cold fury swirling in my eyes. Serena, this is a cemetery, not a place for your tantrums. She jerked her head up, her face streaked with tears, her eyes swollen like walnuts. Sis. Why won't you believe me? I've already taken the paternity test. The report is right here. She pulled a few crumpled sheets of paper from her pocket and thrust them toward me. It clearly states right here, there's a 99.99% probability that I'm Dad's daughter. I am his child. I stared at the paper in her hand, then at her tear-streaked face. Before she could react, I grabbed her wrist with such force that she cried out in pain. The paternity test reports in her hand scattered to the ground, blown in all directions by the wind. Slap. The crisp sound of the slap reverberated through the cemetery. Serena was struck so hard that her head snapped to the side, blood immediately seeping from the corner of her mouth. She looked at me in disbelief, her eyes filled with terror. Is this a place for you to act recklessly? I raised my hand and slapped her other cheek. You dare come crying and making a scene at my father's grave with a few dubious paternity test reports? She was dazed by the blow, tears mixing with blood as they streamed down her face. She mumbled incoherently, it's true, the report is true. True? I pushed her hand away, and she staggered backward, nearly falling to the ground. I bent down to pick up a fallen paternity test report, tore it into pieces without even glancing at it, and scattered them in the wind. Take your fake report and get out. My gaze swept over the gathered guests as I raised my voice. Everyone here has witnessed it, it's not that I, Serena, am intolerant, but someone insisted on causing a scene at my father's funeral. From this day onward, if anyone dares to come to the Sue family under the pretense of kinship, don't blame me for being merciless." Selena was still sobbing in Julian's arms, muttering, "I won't leave." Julian's face turned alternately pale and livid, but in the end, he gritted his teeth and forcibly dragged Selena away. Their figures disappeared at the cemetery gate, and the wind gradually stilled. Half a year after my father's burial, I fully took over Sue Group. The furrowed brows of the senior executives instantly smoothed out upon seeing the quarterly report. Later, at a banquet, I shut down opportunistic competitors with just 3 sentences. The gossip in the A-list circle that the eldest daughter of the Sue family can't hold her own gradually turned into Serena is actually tougher than her father. Every time the butler reported on Selena's movements, there was a hint of barely concealed mockery in his tone. "That Serena hasn't been showing up at the company lately. She's been standing outside GU Holdings every day, rain or shine." He placed surveillance screenshots on my desk. In the photos, Selena's eyes were fixed intently on Julian. I heard she stopped Julian's car in the parking lot last week, crying and saying she's pregnant with his child. Julian's assistants had to drag her away. Julian must really be panicking. "Serena, can you talk to her? I've never touched her. Now she's like a piece of sticky plaster, impossible to shake off." "Talk to her? Didn't Julian think she was pitiful? Now you have the perfect chance to protect her." His face instantly flushed beet red. "I only meant to. Is it just that you want to use her to mess up my life, to make me feel like I can't live without you?" I raised my eyes to look at him. "Or do you want to secretly interfere with my life while I'm dealing with family matters?" Julian's Adam's apple bobbed violently, his mouth opening and closing without uttering a single word. Looking at his disheveled appearance, I suddenly felt it was all rather dull. In truth, I'd long seen through his scheme. "Serena, I know I was wrong." He suddenly crouched down, gripping my desk with both hands, his posture even lower than when he proposed. "Give me another chance, I'll make her disappear immediately. I promise I'll never." "There's no need." I cut him off, pressing the intercom to ask my secretary to escort him out. "Julian, you should focus on cleaning up your own mess first." Later, I chose someone for a marriage alliance. Lucas, the true heir of Circle A, who holds control over half of the country's port logistics and was the only one who quietly comforted me during my father's passing, without trying to interfere in the Sue family's affairs. The engagement banquet was set for the night of the full moon at the beginning of the month. As I stood beside Lucas, accepting the guests' blessings, I caught sight of Julian in the corner. He was staring intently at the diamond ring on my ring finger. Halfway through the banquet, he indeed approached me, blocking my way while Lucas was busy socializing. "Why him?" His voice was heavy with the smell of alcohol. "Is it just because his family has more influence than mine?" "Serena, you weren't like this before." "What was I like before?" "I held the champagne glass, being fooled by you or owing you gratitude?" His face paled slightly. "I know I was wrong before, but my feelings for you are genuine." "Genuine enough to scheme against me with a love child?" I laughed. "Julian, you ask me why I chose him?" I leaned closer, whispering just loud enough for the two of us to hear, "Because you're a fool. You thought you could control me with Selena, but never expected she'd turn around and bite you instead." I enunciated each word with deliberate emphasis. "Your genes, I fear passing them on would ruin my family's legacy." Julian seemed to have all his strength drained from him, staggering back 2 steps before colliding with the champagne tower behind him. Standing amidst the shattered mess, he stared at me with hollow eyes. Lucas stepped forward at the right moment, subtly shielding me behind him as he gave Julian a slight nod. "Julian, if you've had too much to drink, you should head back and rest early." The crystal chandeliers in the banquet hall shimmered overhead, casting a dazzling halo of light. I knew that the farce that had lasted over half a year could finally come to an end. As for Julian and Selena's future, I didn't care. All I wanted was to take full control of my own life and our family's century-old legacy.